Imagine a single bridge carrying nearly $400 million worth of goods every single day. That's what happens at the Detroit-Windsor border crossing, one of the busiest trade corridors in North America. Every car engine, tomato crate, and truckload of steel that moves between the U.S. and Canada often crosses that one thin line. Construction on the Gordie Howe Bridge officially began in 2019. On a freezing February morning, as fog rolled across the Detroit River, two massive steel towers started rising, one in Windsor, Ontario, and one in Detroit, Michigan. The vision was clear: a modern 6-lane superhighway stretching 1.5 miles across the water, designed to carry up to 12,000 trucks a day. In the spring of 2025, the White House dropped a political bomb. President Donald Trump announced a 25% tariff on cars imported from Canada and Mexico. The move was justified under Section 232 of the 1974 Trade Act, which allows the president to take action if imports are seen as a threat to national security. The message was clear: bring production home, break dependency on foreign-made cars. But on the ground in places like Windsor and Detroit, the results were instant chaos. The Gordie Howe Bridge wasn't just a piece of infrastructure. It was a financial promise. Canada had pledged that the $5 billion project would pay for itself, with tolls from trucks and cars generating $70 million in annual revenue. That's what convinced investors, including major pension funds, to pour money into the bridge's bonds. But those calculations depended on one crucial thing: traffic volume. After the 25% tariff announcement, truck crossings plunged. Instead of the predicted 10,200 vehicles per day, the new forecast dropped to around 6,800, a one-third collapse. For the toll model, that was devastating. Fewer vehicles meant less revenue. Less revenue meant the bridge might not cover its debt. Suddenly, that once-safe investment started looking risky. The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, which held nearly $280 million in bridge bonds, grew nervous. Credit rating agencies put the project on watch, warning that lower traffic could lead to a downgrade. If that happened, the cost of borrowing for Canada would rise. Swap spreads widened. Investors got spooked. Behind closed doors, Ottawa scrambled to find solutions. The Bank of Canada was forced to adjust its currency hedge windows to deal with the fallout. Because tariffs raised logistics costs, they also added pressure on the Canadian dollar, which slipped in value. Worse, the central bank warned that cross-border tensions were adding 0.4 percentage points to inflation, just as they were trying to keep prices under control. It wasn't just a transportation crisis anymore. It was a national economic issue, and the financial backbone of the Gordie Howe Bridge was beginning to bend. The ripple effects of the tariffs didn't stop at finance desks or corporate boardrooms. They hit neighborhoods, union halls, and city councils. People on both sides of the border felt the sting in real life. In Windsor, factories slowed to a crawl. Workers who once punched in for full shifts found themselves cut to part-time or laid off entirely. At the local Unifor Union Hall, the mood was tense. People weren't just losing wages, they were losing stability. Families that had depended on steady assembly line jobs for generations were suddenly left guessing what tomorrow would bring. In Detroit, things weren't any better. Foundries that specialized in engine block contracts began shutting their doors. According to a Michigan State University professor, up to 15 small foundries in Wayne County risked closure because their Canadian suppliers were now too expensive. It wasn't just a Canadian problem. This was a binational crisis. Even agriculture got caught in the crossfire. Windsor's greenhouses, which export tomatoes and peppers to the United States, saw orders dry up. At the same time, Michigan soybean and corn exports to Canada took a 27% dive. Ottawa responded by retaliating, slapping tariffs on United States goods like bourbon, oranges, Wisconsin cheese, and California wine. These weren't random choices. They were picked for maximum political pain. Local leaders erupted. Windsor's mayor threatened to cut funding for United States-Canada cultural events. Detroit City Council members accused Washington of holding the local economy hostage. On the campaign trail, Republicans used the crisis to rally for economic nationalism, while Democrats rushed to save union votes. Meanwhile, in the shadows of all this chaos, the Moran family, owners of the old Ambassador Bridge, saw a surprising silver lining. If the Gordie Howe Bridge couldn't reach full capacity, the Ambassador would stay relevant and profitable. Behind the scenes, reports surfaced that Maroon lobbyists had quietly submitted national security concerns to lawmakers during the tariff talks. Politics had fully hijacked a bridge that was supposed to unite two nations. With the Gordie Howe Bridge nearly finished but facing a traffic collapse, Canadian officials rushed to find ways to keep the project alive. Behind the scenes, what started as an infrastructure plan was turning into a game of political survival. The first idea was ambitious: convert part of the bridge for rail-on-road traffic. Special sections where light freight trains could run alongside trucks. It would allow the bridge to serve new industries and reduce the risk of relying only on cars and trucks. But the cost? $450 million extra. Ottawa pulled the plug. It was too expensive for a project already under financial strain. Then came a more modest proposal: build a new customs hall at the Detroit Intermodal Terminal to speed up inspections. It would cost around $160 million, and while it sounded good, it would only shave 5 to 10 minutes off wait times. Not enough to fix the deeper problem. As long as the tariffs remained, faster customs wouldn't save the bridge. Meanwhile, Ottawa tried another approach: diplomacy. Behind closed doors, Canadian and United States negotiators floated a compromise: reduce the tariff from 25% to 15%, and in return, Canada would remove some retaliatory items, like Kentucky bourbon and Florida oranges. It wasn't a done deal, but it showed both sides were feeling the heat. There were also small signs of recovery in the private sector. Logistics giants like Amazon and UPS began testing the Gordie Howe Bridge's new AI-powered customs lane. It processed trucks 35% faster than the Ambassador Bridge. That gave them hope, and they planned thousands of crossings for the next 2 months. Still, the traffic wasn't flowing like it was supposed to. Many trucking companies weren't yet registered in the bridge's new electronic billing system. Some simply stuck with the old Ambassador route because its tolls were cheaper. The bridge's tech was promising, and diplomacy was inching forward, but nothing could move fast enough to fully reopen the supply chains. It was clear if the Gordie Howe Bridge was going to succeed, it would need more than clever design or faster lanes. It would need political will on both sides of the border. The Gordie Howe International Bridge officially opened on September 17, 2025, but the celebration felt muted. Early morning fog drifted over the Detroit River. The steel towers, meant to symbolize unity, looked more like ghostly silhouettes in the mist. Canadian and American flags fluttered above the protocol tent, where dignitaries exchanged firm handshakes and stiff smiles. In speeches, United States officials said tariffs were a matter for negotiation. Canada called the bridge a line of hope. But the applause was cautious. Everyone in the room, from ministers to truck drivers, knew the truth. Hope alone won't move freight. In the first week after opening, the bridge averaged just 6,740 vehicles per day, far below the original estimate of 10,200. Truckers avoided the route, either because their companies weren't set up for the new toll system, or because they still feared the uncertainty around tariffs. Some shipments stayed parked, some factories stayed quiet. At a diner in Windsor, the lunchtime crowd thinned. A cashier said it best: "Even selling hamburgers is tied to the United States-Canada rivalry. I get it now." In Detroit's Greektown, the karaoke nights at a logistics bar were canceled. Too many truckers had stopped crossing the border to save fuel. Back in Ottawa, policymakers quietly drafted Plan C, a federal subsidy to cut tolls for the first 10 years just to attract more traffic. Others floated a fast lane incentive for United States exporters, but critics called it a desperate move, throwing good money after bad. Despite all this, some refused to give up. At the bridge office, data analysts noticed something promising. Amazon and UPS weren't the only ones interested. Smaller logistics firms were testing the new lanes too, and if the tariff dispute could be resolved, the Gordie Howe Bridge might still become the logistics magnet it was meant to be. Meanwhile, pressure was mounting on both governments. Allies like Japan, Germany, and the United Kingdom began quietly warning that North America's protectionist turn was hurting the global supply chain. And with the United States presidential election looming, tariffs had become a hot campaign issue. As night fell on opening week, the bridge's LED sign lit up, "Welcome, Bienvenue." But whether that welcome would turn into real, lasting cooperation was still uncertain. The truth is, bridges aren't just made of steel and concrete. They're built on trust, the kind that can't be measured in meters or millions. And when that trust breaks, The cost shows up everywhere. In paychecks, in prices, in abandoned lunch counters. One day, the lathes in Windsor will spin again. The overhead cranes in Detroit will fire up at night. And when that happens, Gordie Howe's bridge will carry more than freight. It'll carry the repaired spine of a cross-border neighborhood. Until then, it stands as a visible reminder of what happens when politics, protectionism, and promises collide. Do you think trade wars are worth the cost? Should infrastructure be protected from politics? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching.